sometimes we run into it because, we talk for usually about an hour and a half or so.
Right.
But every now and then we'll get like 45 minutes in and whatever the people are using like just dies on them. So
Right.
before we get too far into it, just wanted to make sure whatever you had either was plugged in or had enough battery or we'd
Yeah,
be
I
good
got
on that
my
end.
cord hooked up. So if it
All right.
dies, I don't know how to fix it.
Okay. No worries. That's
Well, that's
perfect.
good.
That's perfect.
Oh, and Joe, I was going to mention to you, I need to have a hard out by about 8 o'clock. I've got to run some stuff to Macon that just came in the mail.
That's fine. I'm going to want dinner by 8 o'clock anyway. So
Yeah, that's one thing. Jade, have you already eaten dinner?
Oh, no, I don't eat until about 10, 11 o'clock usually.
Holy cow. What are you doing?
well,
Feeding
and you're in
horses.
Arizona right now, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it's
So
like
I saw
4
on your website, it said Rosebud, Arizona, Arkansas. Is that where you
Yes,
live
sir.
most of the time?
That is.
Well, how about that? Are you from that area?
So I was born in Chandler, Arizona, and I moved to Arkansas when I was about 6. My dad's from Arkansas.
Oh, that makes sense. But Arizona, do you go back down there now just because of the team roping community? And I know a lot of those guys
Yeah,
do that, right?
yeah, and the weather. I don't have covered facilities or anything in Arkansas, and it rains so much that it makes it tough to ride a bunch of horses unless I just want to ride through the mud all day, which I'm fine with, but I'd rather ride in sunny and 65. So,
Well, we
and
understand that.
it's
Yeah.
easier. I can network with a lot more people here than I can at home. So
There
this
you
is my
go.
half.
Well, when you do get home, if you decide to build a covered arena, we know some folks. Little
Oh,
shameless
perfect.
plug there. We just recently started. You know what? We're so bad at the whole sponsorship thing, but it's really just a friend of ours. And then,
Uh-huh.
technically we are like a sponsor, but we work with them. But they build a lot of arenas and stuff, and they're
Heck
great.
yeah.
But gosh, yeah, it's so nice to have one. I'm lucky because I get to just kind of mooch off of the place that I'm at. We've got a big
Right.
covered arena, but yeah, you kind of take that for granted, huh?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice. So
So are you in Arizona just for the winter then? Or like how long
yes,
are
sir.
you going to be there?
About 5, 6 months. Just kind of depends on what I got going on at home, but usually I'm here for the whole winter.
Okay, cool. And how long you been doing that?
This is my 3rd year, so I've been doing it for
Okay.
about 2 years.
Okay. Gotcha. So, and you said originally from Arkansas, were you, um, were you like a horse kid growing up? Like, did you grow up in team roping or horses in general or horse training? Like, what
Yeah,
what
I'd
was all
like
that like?
to. I grew up. I think as soon as I came home from the hospital, Dad had a horse saddle. Took me for a ride, but yeah, I've grown up with horses my whole life, and we've raised them. And my dad's always been passionate about training horses and how to get them to just be better than what he grew up riding, and that's how that's how I kind of got into it. But yeah, I've done it my whole life.
Wow.
And how old are you now, Jade?
I'm 24.
24. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you're still like a young buck on this whole deal. Honestly,
Oh,
for to be 24 and not a lot of 24-year-olds get to winter in Arizona for their horse training business.
yeah.
So that's kind of handy.
Yes, sir. That's for sure.
Well, about that. So I've always had the idea that everyone goes down to Arizona, like in the team roping world, or even I think some barrel racers maybe. But you'll have to correct me on that. You're actually there, but don't a lot of people do that? And the image I've had in my mind is everybody's down there just in their camper, like camping out, and then you go to these ropings, like I don't know, 5-6 days a week, and some people
Oh
just
yeah.
keep getting it handed to them, and some people win. Is that kind of what's really going on?
That's what's going on. Like I've improved my living situations every year. I've actually I've got some grandparents that live in Gilbert, and I stayed with them the first year. And then last year, I stayed in a camper just down the road. And this year, I actually sold a horse last year to a family, the Westbrook family, and they invited me to stay with them at their place. So I'm grateful to them for that, but it gets a little better every year, just meeting the right people and I don't know,
Yeah.
being blessed, I guess.
Yeah, I
So,
was gonna say it looks pretty snazzy where you are. But so
yeah.
these ropings, is there like a bunch of people that just have their own private arena and people are roping there, or you go into like big venues, or what's the I guess what's the organization of this type of deal? Because that sounds like a lot of people going there for the winter, a lot of roping going on.
Mhm.
Is it pretty organized?
Organized chaos is the best way to put it. There's a lot, like I'm staying in Forepaugh, which is about 20 miles west of Wickenburg, and it's a little community out in the middle of the desert. And there's an arena in everybody's place, and there's some multi-million-dollar places that have 20 different hookups, and everybody ropes there. And then there's the kind of the one or two people with their camper um, staying there. But usually there's a lot of horses and a lot of people, and they rope all day, every day. So that's kind of what they do.
Wow, man, I imagine you get all types. What kind of,
Yeah,
gosh, that's crazy. Are those little small towns? Like
yeah,
it's
this
almost
would
like
be.
a tourist season, it seems like, huh? Like
It
there's
is.
got to
It
be like a
is.
tourist industry just for the ropers.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a winter community. Like it'll be a ghost town here. There's a few people that stay all year, but everybody usually goes home after about March. Usually,
Wow.
so that's kind
So
of
that's a good
what
bit
they
of
do.
time that everybody's there roping together. I don't know about you,
Yeah,
Joe, but I can't think of anything else in the, well, I know in the English world people do that, but like that's got to have heightened your roping game a lot to go
oh,
down
it
there
does.
and just rope with other, I don't know if they're all great ropers or not, but I'm sure you have many that are, rope with
Right.
them for all that time, just day after day after day.
Yeah, and it's a. I mean, that's what makes Wickenburg so nice is it's a melting pot for everybody. You can be the lowest of low amateurs or an old man that just wants to go enjoy the 15 over rope ins or and there's money to win for everybody, but you just plan on roping against a lot of teams for a lot of money. Um, and there's jackpots everywhere. You can pick and choose where you want to go. You can go to Rancho Rio. You can go to downtown, Horns and Hooves, um, the bar. Like there's so many different arenas, and they've all got good teams. So it's just a matter of who's got the best payout, what number of roping they're having, what format it is, and they just keep. I mean, it's a
Hmm.
huge deal. Like I was shocked the first year, and I think it gets bigger every year. I think the Team Roping Journal does a good job about advertising it. There's just a lot of people that come down, and some only come down for a week for Vegas week, which is happening right now all the way till the World Series finals, and um, that's just kind of a thing that they do because there's more added money, there's more money in the pot, higher entry fees, but I mean, you have a good day and you could win 30 grand.
Holy cow. So when you're down there, are you making your entire income just from going to these team ropings?
I'm not. I actually am kind of in between. I sold my good head horse last year. I outgrew him a little bit, and I got a bad habit of when I get him good, I'll sell him, just because that's the business I'm in. But I keep a couple around that are a little too stingy for the common team roper, and they're just a little green right now. So I kind of just stay home and train and have some outside horses and do lessons and clinics and stuff. Um, and that's kind of where my income comes from while I'm down here usually. And then when I'm ready, I'll go season a colt and help get those horses ready to sell and kind of go from there. So
Hmm. Sounds like a busy life down there.
very.
Yeah, no kidding. So the team roping deal, I'm get like when did you start that? Like, was that what your dad was big into? Team roping?
Yeah, my dad. So I'm cousins with all the Sherwoods, which Matt Sherwood won the NFR twice in the team roping heading. So my dad grew up around it. He did. His parents didn't do it, but he always wanted to ride horses, and he had these $5 ponies. He tells me stories about and how nasty they were, and he thought, man, there's got to be a better way. Um, but anyhow, he kind of got into roping with my uncle Keith Sherwood. That's who kind of got him started, and he just kind of went at it pretty hard after that. And so I grew up roping, and I was roping off a horse by the time I was 3.
Wow.
Like running steers, dallying, turning them off. He had me a couple good mares that we rode and stuff. So I've been doing it for a long time.
That's a pretty unique way to grow up, seems like.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually me and my dad, I've never got to compete with him until the other day. I went to a junior rodeo to help some kids because my dad got Crohn's disease when I was born, or had it before I was born. So he's real sick all the time. So he never, everything he kind of taught me instead of showed me, he just told me how to do it. I had to go figure it out, or he'd be outside just coaching me or whatever. But we went to a junior rodeo the other day to help, and they had a open at the end, and I spun him one, and he roped him, and that was our first time entered, and first check we ever won. So that was pretty cool, pretty special. So that was pretty fun.
Hey there, On the Move listener. Do you enjoy listening to this podcast? If you've made it this far in the episode, I assume you do. But you never know. I could just be talking to someone's house cat at this point. But if you are there and you like the podcast, the best thing you can do to help support our journey to keep this thing going is to find us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, leave a rating, leave a review, get on social media, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube. The more we can grow this, the easier it's going to become for us to put out episodes every week and get awesome guests so we can learn and stay on the move just like you. Thanks.
That's awesome. Yeah, I bet that would be pretty special after all those years of learning from him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And
no kidding.
For you then, because, you talk about your income being training horses and kind of on the education side, was that kind of always the trajectory for you? Like you knew you were going to train horses or do something in team roping, or did that kind of come later?
It kind of came later. So I grew up and I like to hunt and fish and trap and just be outside and do whatever, I don't know, boys like to do. I like to do it all. I didn't like going to school. I didn't like anything of that nature. So I think I was about 12, and I had been training outside horses since I was 9, but I started to dread it a little because I was riding a lot of dinks and getting bucked off a lot. And my dad is very like,
okay, pause just for a second. So how does a 9-year-old like get involved taking outside horses? Like, is this your dad kind of brokering, the neighbor's naughty pony off on you, or like how does a 9-year-old get involved riding outside horses?
No, a little bit that way. So everything I've ever bought, I paid for. So my first entry fees when I was old enough to go rope by myself. So I remember making $20 one day and going in the $10 jackpot that night, and and roping. And anyway, so the only way I knew to make any money was to try to train horses, or I'd go chop down trees in the fence line for 5 cents a tree with a machete or whatever it may be, to make a little bit of money. But my uncle had some colts that were getting to be 3-4 years old and unhandled. And those were my first horses that I started training. And then it just kind of built from there. So that's kind of how it started.
That's interesting. That's cool. Yeah. And I know I kind of derailed your train of thought, but so you started riding outside horses when you're 9, and you said, but you got to where you were kind of dreading that because of the horse flesh you had.
Yeah, I was dreading it. My dad was we'd never had a lot of money, but we'd always try to find as nice a horse as we could for what we had. And we'd always find one that the structure was there, but maybe they're real skinny. Someone wasn't taking care of them, and we'd bring them home and kind of feed them, start riding them. And we had a lot of success with that, but we finally had a decent breeding program. And I think I was 12 or 13. And we had we had five, 3 to 5 year old geldings and mares. I can't remember what exactly they all were, but my dad told me, because I did not want to do it. I was done. And he said, I just got out of school. I don't know what I was going to do all summer, but he's like, you're not allowed to do anything until you ride all 5 of them horses every day, all summer. And his exact quote is, this is when school really begins. Just like off the Cowboys. So I started riding them, and it stunk for a while because they're big and stingy and strong. And I got thrown and stomped on and all sorts of stuff. But by the end of the summer, they all would lope a pretty circle. I could holler the word whoa, and they'd drag their butt. And I'm like, I don't think I really knew what I was doing, but I was consistent. And those horses were smart. And then that kind of gave me a little bit of passion for it, and I kind of stuck with it. And I probably went back and forth a few times of, I'm not sure what to do. And so then I started making all my head horses and heel horses and started winning. And I haven't stopped since. I think probably when I was 18 or 19 is when I was like, you know what, I was praying. I wasn't sure what to do with my life. And the Lord was like, you were made to train horses. So I said, yes, sir. And I hadn't looked back.
So at that point in your life, was there some other things that were kind of grabbing your attention that you were even considering doing?
Well, I thought about being like a government trapper or stuff like that, because I love trapping coyotes and bobcats and foxes, but there just wasn't any money in the hides, especially in Arkansas. So I wasn't sure what to do. I don't like computers. I don't like sitting down. I don't like I knew I wasn't going to college. I did not want to do that. That really I don't know. It bothered me. I didn't like school. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting pickle to be in because, if you've been raised doing something from that young of an age, you get to the point where you're ready to leave home or go do your own thing. And you've got the conundrum between like, do I just like this because I was born doing it? Or, obviously some people don't even have other options, but a guy like yourself, you've been working hard since you're a little kid. You obviously can go out and you could do what you want to do. So you kind of have that moment you're faced with where, some of us will choose like I ride horses. I didn't grow up riding horses. So it's pretty easy for me to be like, oh, I remember why I do this. Cause I put it on myself. But, for a guy like you, I could see how that would be kind of tricky to like, see if that was really what you wanted to do with your life or not. What can you kind of, I don't know, elaborate on what it was that, I don't know, that's because, obviously you said you prayed about it, but was there anything specifically that kind of was your North Star as far as you going, yeah, this is what I'm going to do and put my effort behind it and, become good at it?
Yeah, like I said, I put myself through a lot of mental turmoil, worrying about it. Like, because if I'm the kind of person, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it the very best I can. And I might look stupid doing it, but it's the best I got right now, and I'll get better. So I don't know. I was on my mission. I served a mission for my church, and I was getting close to the end of it, and I did not know what to do. Like I was going to come home and, it's like, oh, get married, get a job, live your life, do whatever. But I'm not really built that way. So I wanted to know what I was going to do and go be good at it. And so that's kind of, I don't know. Like I said, I was praying, and I guess on my mission, there was a couple people that had just like, there was this one family that had a Appaloosa 6-year-old gelding that they rescued, and they were scared to death of him. And I wasn't allowed to ride him, but I went over and I helped him groundwork him and taught him how to get the horse to think and move his feet. And I actually helped that guy. And he's not a cowboy. He's not, he likes to hunt. You know, they take their horses out in the mountains. And anyway, I got him where they put their first ride on him. And then the second day he's riding bareback throughout all the woods in Montana, and rides him into a pond and swims next to him. And they just thought that was the greatest thing ever. And then I got to realizing that I think that's the whole reason I was told that I need to focus on my passion with horses, is because I feel like I really can understand how they're feeling, and I can see their emotions and what's that next step to get them to think a certain way, or and I'm able to communicate that with people on a kind of a real level. I guess so. Maybe that answers your question, but that's kind of how I felt like, I don't know, that's just what my soul told me to do, I guess. I was drawn toward it.
Yeah. No, I can kind of resonate with that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's great. You thought through it, because you're right, man. There's a lot of people that, I don't know, maybe don't put as much thought into it at that age. I think it's fair to say everybody puts thought into it in their life, but, you know, to be, gosh, because you have such a head start, you know, no wonder you, I think Joe mentioned to me you're a number 7 team roper, or that's how they
Yes, sir.
grade you guys, which is funny to me.
Yeah.
Isn't that like the opposite of like a golf player, like a 7? Like a 3 would be better than a 7, right?
Yes.
Handicap, where like in your case, it goes the other way. So
Yep.
7's pretty good. What's the top end of that?
So for headers, it's a 9, and for healers, it's 10. So I'm a 7 on both
Why do they
sides.
differentiate 10 and 9?
I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, to be quite honest with you.
Huh? Maybe the folks doing the 9. You said the healers have 9 and the headers do 10. Maybe
No,
the
the
healers are
headers
on like
have
the
9,
metric system or
healers have
something.
10. Yeah.
Oh, I had it backwards. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like you definitely got a head start, because, man, sometimes when I see a guy that's, because you're even a teeny bit younger than I am, and you're like, oh man, that guy's so good. Well, you started when you were 9. You know, we talk about sometimes you've probably heard of the 10,000 hour rule.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it helps to get your 10,000 hours under your belt when you start at 9. So
It definitely
you can
does.
thank your dad for that, right?
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. I had a rope in my hand since I could pick up my hand. So,
Have you ever put the first ride on a colt in a muddy arena? Or maybe you've tried preg checking a group of cows in a thunderstorm. Maybe you're not even the animal type, but we've all crawled under our pickup truck to change the oil in a parking lot. And eventually we had to head in the store and buy a cheap tarp in that vain attempt to keep the water off our sacred project. Well, that'll work for so long. And when you're at home, it just gets older and older. What you need is a roof, and you need a quality structure, and one made of good American steel, built to last a lifetime. Well, that's something worthwhile investing in. Heck, you might even decide to make a barn dominium. You know, people are doing that these days. So if you've been working on your farm or ranch for a while, or you're just getting started on a place, and you've been wanting to build, and the price has been holding you back, or you couldn't find a good manufacturer to work with, now is the time to look into that steel building you've been wanting to build. And the folks you need to look into are Metal Material Direct. They also offer a revolutionary octagon steel fencing system. This fencing system can be used for arena fences, corrals, working pens, as well as a heavy-duty fence that can be dressed up or down, depending on if it's for your lawn or used as a commercial fence around your farm or business. They use a revolutionary clip design, which allows those of you who don't weld to put this stuff together. Be perfect for you. Head over to www.metalmdi.com/onthemove, and there you'll find their 3D configurator. It allows you to plug in your dimensions and specifications for that building you want to build and see it as a finished project. So in conclusion, head on over to www.metalmdi.com/on-the-move and get a custom quote for your new steel building, garage, shop, barn dominium, or fencing system. And be sure and let them know the guys at On the Move sent you. Yeah. So like as you decided to, obviously you were saying you helped that guy with his horse, and you could see how that, that was good. You saw that it was something you could do, and you're bringing value. But you were already team roping at that point. So as you kept getting better at team roping, do you feel like it was like this really hard thing that you're trying to get better at, or did it feel a little easier because you'd been doing it for so long, and now you just had to figure out how to kind of play the game rather than I guess get out there and just hone your personal skill?
It's a little bit of both. I think for me, the biggest things I struggle with roping is because I feel like my dad has kind of engraved in me a very good foundation. Like I have a good foundation in roping, what I need to do to execute my run. But my biggest struggle, probably team roping nowadays, is riding colts and roping, and then actually riding my good horse and going and competing, because it's hard for me to turn off the, hey, my horse, he's a little bit out of whack right here, I would like to move him over. Well, then I forget about roping and I want to correct my horse in a way, instead of, well, I'm here, money's on the line, I've got to rope 2 feet, or I've got to catch the horns and score good regardless of what happens. Because I mean, there's so much emotion going on in your animals, and when you're at a higher level, you're expecting 115% all the time. So it makes it tougher for me to turn that switch off, especially since I don't have good horse, my finished horses, because I've either sold them or they've died or something. So that's my biggest struggle, I think, with team roping and going and competing, is turning my competition switch on. Like, I'm always competitive, but I still got to be a horseman, but I still got to do my job and catch the cow and execute the run. So, and do it in a timely, quick manner, use the steer that we draw the best and strive to execute that. Sometimes I want to maybe ride my horse up one more stride and help him look better and be more balanced. And some of that stuff you got to throw out the window when you're trying to win a lot of money.
Sure.
And not really throw it out the window. I mean, but you expect your horse to do it, but sometimes it doesn't matter how good they're trained. They're going to make a mistake. So you got to be able to just adapt and overcome that
do your job right there.
Yeah. And go home and recognize what the weakness was and work on it. So
yeah. So that's really interesting that you say that. Do you know who Joe Walter is?
Ricky has talked about him, but I don't know him.
Yeah. So he's pretty well-known guy in the horsemanship world. And we've had him on this podcast. And I don't know how old Joe is, but kind of in like the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s, he had a pretty successful show career.
Yes.
Even though he's kind of mainly been like a ranch and horsemanship guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he said when he was showing and learning to do that whole deal, that a lot of the people showing with him, a lot of his peers were like, well, you'll never make a great showman because you're too good of a horseman. And he was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, there's a reason the engineers don't drive the race car,
Yeah.
like he like, you say he's going to cut a cow or something like that, because he did a lot of the like ranch versatility and stock horse type stuff. And he's like, we're sitting there trying to pick a cow out and work this cow, and I'm thinking, well, that didn't feel too good, or he's braced right there, instead of just cut the cow out,
Mm-hmm.
do your run, so it's interesting because he said something very similar about his show career, and he accomplished quite a bit, in my opinion anyway. But Yeah, there is, with the whole competition deal, like you said, you have to kind of not ignore it because you want to be aware of it and
Right.
address it later. But it's like that. This is the moment, and you could say that about doing a job on the ranch or something. You're going to doctor a cow out in the pasture. You can't always just have everything soft and perfect and
Yep.
like take the time to do everything, because anytime there's a little pressure, there are time sensitive things happening around you, and
Absolutely.
you can't wait on the horse maybe like you would in a perfect setting. So yeah, that's interesting, and I think you're probably not the only trainer, if you want to use that word, the only person who's worried about his horsemanship that's ever had that problem in competition.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had it affect me a lot. Like there's a lot of times, my horse kind of, we're running big, strong, fast steers, and they're taking hit after hit, and they're kind of getting a little tired, and I need him to give me one more stride down the arena before he goes in, but he kind of leaks into the inside, and I don't like that feeling. I don't like feeling like I'm trapped with the cow out there. But to the naked eye, when people watch, it doesn't look that way to a lot of people if your horse is just barely cheating you. But for me, it's like a major no, that I mentally have to try to turn off. Like, because when you're showing at the fraternity, you've still got to rope 2 feet or you don't have a chance to win. Like, you still got to catch the horn. So um, it definitely messes with your focus, because I'm so dialed into where his hips are, where his shoulders are. Is he staying in between my reins? And I don't want to force him that way. I want him to want to be there, but they're still going to make a decision, and I just have to react to their decision and help them in that half a second moment, to try to make it, to execute our job. So that's always a struggle, but I think if I had some horses I really didn't care about and wanted to practice on and stuff, I might be able to switch that off a little bit better. But the problem is I care about every horse, so it's really hard for me to
Sure.
turn it off.
Yeah.
Huh.
Makes sense.
So you being a team roper, that implies team, obviously. So when you're roping with another guy, are you typically heeling or heading, or do you do both? Because I know, like, I've talked to some team ropers and they'll say I'm a heeler, and that's all they do, and I'm not mocking that at all, but it's a little funny because on the ranch, there's all kind of jokes, right? And you hear the jokes like a guy like, no, I'm just a healer, and everyone kind of laughs, but it's real, and I get it. Like, listening to you talk, you're putting in a lot of practice. And
Right.
maybe a guy just has the bandwidth to practice one end of the cow to be really fast. So what do you do?
I rope both ends. If it requires a rope, I don't care if I'm catching a cow outside, roping calves, breakawaying on my horses, head and heeling. It does not matter to me. I like training the horses, or helping the horses do their job and like their job. So I have no preference. I like heading a lot because it takes a little more skill. I personally feel like, because it's like the quarterback. He's got to get the ball. I don't know nothing about football, but just from watching, he's got to get the ball. He's got to read the play. He's got to make it happen. And then the healer comes in and catches it and is either in the end zone or runs in a straight line to the touchdown line.
Yeah. Well,
So,
Joe's your football guy. He's the sports expert
perfect.
on this podcast. But as far as roping, I totally get you, because the header, he's going to make or break the healer's shot, right? You're
Yeah,
the
and the
man.
header's got to be able to read. Sorry.
Yeah.
A header's got to be able to read the barrier. Like, if he's late, he's going to make it harder. The healer's got to throw faster. If he's early, he's going to break the barrier. And his horse has got to be dialed into him. A healer can ride a kind of a half blown up donkey a lot of times on the other side that just wants to run around and act stupid in the box, and they can kind of get out because the barrier is either longer or it's non-existent, or at a rodeo there's no barrier, so they can just turn that sucker loose and run him wider if he's running too hard. They can get by a lot better than a header. A header's got to have a sure enough in tune athlete to sure enough go win at a high level.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about your horses? Do you have specific horses that you try to heel on or head on, or do you get your horse where he does both?
I play to their strengths. I like a horse that's big enough to rope both ends, and I've had some little bitty ones that like heading better than heeling. Um, but I feel like an athlete's an athlete. So if they want to do their job, I cater to what they're best at. If they like to score and they like to um, run and rate, and maybe they're not as big naturally built to be as big a stopper, but they can really run, they're going to probably stay on the head side. I'll heel on them some just to give them something else to do, because I think just like anybody, if you do the same thing over and over and over, you kind of dread it. I use them a lot outside, but I just cater to the horse's strengths. I don't want to just force one into doing something because that's what I think he should be. It's kind of, I want them to like it. So if they like it and they make my job easier, then I'm able to win and my clients are able to win.
Yeah, that
But
makes
if I needed
sense.
them in a pinch, I could go heel on them or I could go head on them. But that's not their number one priority. That's not their strength. That's just, hey, I can do it. I'm decent at it. And there's some that are great at both, but I think
Yeah.
usually they are better at one or the other.
Yeah. Do you find that other team ropers are pretty particular about only riding their horses in the arena and just
Yeah.
practicing team roping, and so
Yes.
then are you kind of an outlier in the sense that you take your horses and you just do whatever you want with them in terms of
Right.
exposure and
I
jobs?
absolutely. And that's kind of one of my, I feel like, strengths. I like,
Hey, On the Move listener. Have you been following us on social media? Have you been watching the video format of the podcasts? If so, you've probably noticed by now that we have On the Move merch. I'm wearing one of our hats right now. The first order of hats we did flew off the shelves, and we've only got a handful left in each style. But we're doing another order, and if you want to pre-order your On the Move hat today, go to www.onthemovepodcast.com. There you'll find our Shopify store with hats, mugs, stickers, and other merch. Get it just in time for the holiday season and let everyone know that you're on the move.
if I want to go pack a deer out on my horse, I'm going to go do it. I want a very well-rounded horse and animal, and I think a lot of team ropers, and I feel like that's where the industry really is weak, is these guys won't take their horse out of that box, and they get on him, lope some circles, and run 10 steers or 20 or however many they want to run. They might take care of them and do all the maintenance and all that stuff, but they're mentally not taken care of. Some of the best release you can give to a horse is putting your hand down and saying, hey, we're going to walk out across this pasture. And you might have to turn him on and go blow up there and catch a cow, but you put your hand back down and he's like, all right, I get it. That was kind of fun. I enjoyed that, you know. But I think that's where a lot of team ropers struggle, and have a lot of friends that all they care about is rope. And you can see it in their horses. They're mentally frustrated. And I don't think they're bad people by no means, but they want to rope. And I do too. I mean, I've been guilty about roping, but the more I learn about the horse's well-being mentally, it takes care of their physical, emotional, all that other stuff will come into play the more I use them outside. I don't have to go torture them. I give them a different job, give them something else to think about. And when I bring them back to the arena, they're like, hey, I'm ready. This is the good stuff. So that's kind of my program a little bit, is being able to do a little bit of everything that I want to do on my horses.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny, even with all this like natural horsemanship that that everyone's kind of caught on to. And I said that because, you know, we always have a joke. We say there's nothing natural about strapping a saddle on a
Right.
horse and trying to ride it, right? So we're talking about just trying to do better. I don't know if natural horsemanship is the right term, right? But everyone kind of uses that. But so often, like I had a horse come in today, and And I was talking to the owner before they left. But before they left, they said, here, let me show you a video of how it was going. And I had this guy come over and ride it. And they just, all this stuff to say, and they're talking about it for hours. But then you watch the video and it was like, took 2 seconds to say, oh, well, it's just that guy rides like shit. Like no offense to him. He just rides like horribly. And he's just like really pissing that horse off. And yeah, she just bucked him off. Like there's no wonder he's just rude,
Right.
and how often, people are trying to do this and that, but it's so much more about them than about the horse. And
Absolutely.
it's not what they did. It's what they didn't do. And they need to do even less of it. So I think that's really cool. We've had Nick Dowers on this podcast. You probably know who that is. And kind of the same thing with him, just having his horses be able to go work cows at home or go out and ride across the ranch and do all these other jobs. And I don't understand. I mean, and I don't have much ground to speak from because I'm not in the show world, but I don't know why more people wouldn't want that for their horse. I mean, do you because you're right in that community, do you ever have talks with people about that or get approached about that? Or has that ever come up that,
I talk about that.
I mean, I
a
know
lot.
because we know it's bad etiquette to go up to somebody and be like, hey, I can help you with your horse. Right. But
Right.
you would think it would come up, right? Because you're in that circle of people.
Yeah. I talk about that a lot. And I guess the most common synopsis, if that's the right word to use, is that people have other things going on and they want to rope steers. It's their hobby. And some guys that are very high numbered, like to rope a lot. That's all they want to do. They don't want to saddle their horse and just drop your hand and spend the hour that it takes to ride him around the desert or ride him up the mountain or just go enjoy the countryside. They want to rope steers. They want to perfect their craft. And I think that's where the disconnect is a little bit. And it doesn't, I don't think it bothers them if their horse acts up or something's wrong. Well, he needs injected, or well, he needs this. And they'll give them all the supplements, all the care, and they're taking care of them. Don't get me wrong. But like I said, their mental state's not taken care of. So everything else breaks down. And so I think that's where the biggest disconnect, especially with team ropers, they want to rope steers. Like, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. If I could just run a million every day, I would. But some horses, I might heel one steer and he drags his butt and feels like $1 million, and I'm going to loosen the cinch and go put him on the fence because he needs to know that that was a phenomenal job. I appreciate it. And I have to build them up where they'll do it 10 times in a row. But I don't want to run their guts out. I don't want to run them where they're just heaving and upset, because then they start to dread it, and then it's a kind of a vicious cycle on the way down from that. But I think I have a lot of conversations with a lot of guys, and they're like, well, you just cowboy on them, and that's why they get good. And I'm like, no, I'm not cowboying on them. I care about them. I want them. It's just like when you're mad, what do? You go outside and take a walk. You don't sit there, you can sit there and pound sand all you want, but if you'll go take a walk and think about it, you can kind of calm yourself down and come back to level earth, and proceed with whatever conversation or whatever made you mad, or you could just sit there and harp on it and you stay mad. So that's kind of how I think about it with these horses is, if you keep them there and you take them from the stall to the trailer to the arena, or the stall to the arena, pretty soon, especially if you're if they've got any ambition, there's always the horse that's just, no, I don't really care, but if a horse has got any sting or any ability or desire, if you make it too hard on them every day in and day out, they start to not like it, or not like you, or not like the situation, and they start acting up. So I always try to go for the where is their release? Where are they able to be good mentally? If I have to ride them outside for a week and they try to run off because they're just frazzled, I'll work their feet and put my hand back down. But it's all about how to get those horses thinking and wanting to do a job. And if they're not thinking, it's really hard to do your job. So, but I think that's the biggest disconnect, especially for team ropers, is they want a rope, and I understand it. I get it. I was that kid. I promise you, I've doled down and ruined as many horses as anybody wanting rope steers.
Well, I'll take your word for it. So at what point did you go get linked up with Ricky Quinn? And was that the first time you were exposed to that kind of horsemanship?
Yeah, I saw that one of my friends, Jordan Sullivan, he posted about having a Ricky coming and doing a clinic about 30 minutes from the house, and I decided I wasn't going to get any better if I didn't keep learning. So I just went to his clinic and never met him, never heard of him, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was what he taught me was along the lines of what I was trying to learn for myself, what I'd been learning through my horses and what they were teaching me. And so it just fit right into my program with my rope horses, and I thoroughly enjoyed it and really, really liked it. So.
That's good. That's awesome. Yeah, it's it's interesting that you have kind of had this philosophy, and again, a lot of it seems to be, you talk about, riding your horses outside, and Ben alluded to Nick Dowers. For him and his like rein cow horses, he describes it as seasoning, like getting those horses mentally seasoned to where he does have the ability to ride out in his ranch, do these jobs. And he says it's almost like it's like a separate deal, right? Like keep that separate and then go back to the arena and say, hey, I know now there's cows here and we were just doing stuff, but this is a way different deal, right? Because,
Right.
With the Reagan cow horse, you got to run down the fence and be a lot more dialed than you might be trying to just sort pairs on the ranch or something like that. But he said just the ability for that horse to be outside and to, feel back to me and have the mental maturity to deal with all that, it makes going into the arena that much easier for him.
Absolutely.
And, it sounds like you've kind of reached a similar conclusion, which is cool to hear, because if you have a bunch of people who are kind of, running parallel but not interacting with each other, kind of getting to the same conclusions, there must be something to it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I was always the guy they made fun of. When I first started, I had an old Z71 truck with a 3-horse trailer that I pulled the tack room out of, and I fit 6 in there. And, but I might go to the rodeo to run one steer and I'd have 5 horses, but that was the way I could season them. And I day worked and I worked at the sale barns, and what I would do is I'd have my good horse and he'd be saddled and he'd kind of wait. Well, I get there early, and while everybody else that was kind of my ticket. I felt like whenever everybody else was kind of drinking beer and goofing off, I was riding my colt, thinking about my run, showing them the lights, the sign, everything going on. So when it's time for me to haul them, it's no big deal. They've already been everywhere with me. I just saddle them up, and they're like, well, it's another arena. Here we go. And that mental stress goes way down. Of course, yeah, you've got to be able to turn them on and turn them off. But I feel like you're able to have that switch a little better when you can take them out and use them, or you can take them. And when I'd go day work, I'd have 6, 7 horses with me. I don't like riding one all day when I could ride 7 and get them a little better every day. And they all progress, rather than, man, I rode this one into the dirt and he looks like a bag of bones and stuff because he's just drained in every way possible. I could have them healthier and do better. I felt like, and train more horses than just camping on one. So that's kind of my philosophy. I might go the jackpot and I'm planning on riding 3 horses, and I have 3 more colts. And if they stand at the trailer all day and they just have a hay bag, that's fine. They get to see people walk by them, dogs, cars, every situation possible, but it helps those horses be more well-rounded, more respectful. And when it's time to show them the show lights, they're ready. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Another question I had for you, because you mentioned earlier your dad kind of got you guys into breeding horses and things like that. I know there are some like team roping lines.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, here at our place, a gal that works for me, she just got a 3-year-old colt to start, and it's like Skipper W bred. And I don't know a whole lot about quarter horse bloodlines in general, but that was what I was told was like a Skipper W. They're a team roping line, and it's a perfect like gentle colt for her. I don't know how it would do in the arena or anything like that, but can you talk a little bit about, you don't necessarily have to get into pedigrees, but in the breeding world, in this like team roper world, what are people looking for? Like what's like we had a guy on here, Gary Myers, who's a breeder up in Montana, and he talks about how there's some lines that are like proven, and then there's some lines that are fashionable at the time. And you don't need to be go and draw hard lines in the sand, but like what's maybe fashionable in the team roper world now, and then maybe for you yourself, like if you were going to go buy a colt, what would you look for in a prospect to start?
So I guess first and foremost for me, there are a few lines that I draw on horses I don't really mess with, just for the simple fact that I've rode enough of them. I'm like, it's not worth me messing with that. But I think first and foremost, there are a lot of hot bloodlines that people want, like Bet He's a Cats and hashtags and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and there's a lot of those metallic cat. There's a lot of those horses that are winning at the fraternities, and they're great horses. But what I've noticed, I think Trevor Brazil and Miles Baker are doing a very good job of they're trying to get a bigger boned, little bit bigger horses back in the team roping industry, because through the cutting lines and stuff, they're getting a lot of fine bone, smaller horses that can't handle it. And so I feel like they're doing a really good job of expanding the cow run cross and getting more favorable horses for every job back into the team roping community. Just kind of like back in the older days where they bred for bone and foot and ability to do a job on a ranch all day. Like they're kind of going back to that a little bit, because they want horses to last. We want horses to enjoy a long career, and that's kind of, I look for that. The main thing I look for before pedigree or anything else, I look for conformation. I have a certain look that I like. Then I look for disposition. I look for if they're aware, they're alert, how they move their feet, how they travel. And then I look at the bloodlines, because I think I see a lot of people, well, he's a highbrow cat gelding, and I'm like, he looks like a goat. Like he's not made to move that way. Something in the breeding lines got crossed, because that's just because it's on his papers doesn't mean he's able to do the job. He's not highbrow cat himself. He's an individual. So I try to look at the individual, and obviously the bloodlines play into that. But horses have certain traits and whatnot. But that for me is, I try to just, I'm looking at the horse. I don't care. Don't show me the papers until I make a decision there. And I build from that. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I think like I said, with Trevor and Miles, they're starting to figure out what crosses work better, what make better head horses, what are making great heel horses. What horses stand better in the box through their bloodlines. And I think that there is a lot to that. But I've rode great horses of all shapes, sizes, and colors. Some horses that weren't even built to do the job, but they were willing and they wanted to do it, and they could do the job, and they could do it very well. So I try to look at the individual before I look at anything else.
Sure. That's well said. One follow-up question I would have for that, because I didn't realize this until you just said it. What what's the line of thinking there to start putting cutting horse bloodlines into your team roping horses? Because to
Well,
me, that's not very intuitive.
right. So what people liked, you always heard, oh, I want a reject cutter. What they like about that is those horses have such fine-tuned training that, oh, he'll spin around, he'll drag his butt, I can put him in the box and make him chase a cow. From what I've found, like the cutters I've rode, they're pretty scared of a cow. So I have to go about it a different way and teach them to want to crave the cow and kind of pick up their head and not be so low in the ground in their front end and want to travel with their shoulders up and being comfortable right next to the cow with the cows. But I think people desire that good handle, that ability to drag their butt and turn and go and drive. And so I think that's why people like the cutters, but they're also extremely intelligent. That's why they're able to do their job and so athletic, to be able to cut a cow and stay hooked. So I think now what they're trying to do, and I do think it's training. Like you can take a horse that's bred to be a cutter and start him as a roping horse, and he's going to be excellent at his job. I think that's the main. It's however they're started. You can train a horse that's not bred to be a cutter, and he'll sort a cow pretty good. And some of them might cut excellent. It doesn't really matter, but the bloodlines help. And so I think what they're looking for is that ability to read a cow and make moves that are desirable in the roping community. And now they'll cross them on the running horses because they're a little bigger, a little taller, bigger footed, faster, can really run. So if they can get that perfect combination, that's what they want. That's their desired result. And I see a lot more of that happening instead of just breeding cutters or just breeding runners. Like a lot of people are really making that sure enough cross. They might cross a dual ray colt or mare on a dash to fame stud or whatever cross they want to do, to get a horse that they could head on, they could heel on, and it just gives them more avenues, whether they want to run barrels or I know a lady that runs and makes some of the nicest barrel horses in the country, and she doesn't want them over 14-2. She likes the little Calbred. She says they can turn better. And that's her philosophy, but that's how she trains them, and she does a good job, and she takes her time. And so I think it's the same deal. We're training individuals, so it helps to breed for your purpose. But I also think if those horses are started correctly and want to do a job when they're athletic, that you can go pretty much any avenue with them if they want to do it. So I think that's, sorry, I kind of derailed a little, but a lot of people really want those just athletes. They want a horse to think. And I think cutting was way ahead of everything else. So people really focused on those bloodlines and those things. So I think people are just piggybacking off of great programs that were created for other reasons now.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. Over time,
that's great.
Over time, it's a scored event, right? So, time will tell and proof will be in the pudding. Right. But this is kind of a side question, but it goes along with this. How do they score this? Is this is it like a comparative score across all team ropings? So that like if you got a whatever, I don't know if this is a score, but if you got like a 6 and 3 months from now you get a 5, that's still better than that other rodeo? Or is it or roping, or is it specific to each event? So it doesn't really matter what you get in some other roping. It just matters in that particular roping.
Right. So
does that make sense?
There's ropings and rodeos, jackpots. Well, no, and then there's like rope horse.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
but I'm just saying, like barrel racing, like every arena, I think we have a little delay. Sorry about that. But how every, we'll just have to pause a second. But how every barrel racing, they've got, they set up the barrels and then they go for it. And then to my understanding, you can't like compare that to some other barrel racing. because like that's a
Right.
different arena, whole different situation. But
Right.
like it seems like with team roping, yeah, that's what I meant, like that type of comparison.
Okay, yeah. So, like at the jackpots and rodeos, so they go off of how long the arena is, what number of roping. So, like I'm a 7, so if I rope with, say, a 9 healer, we rope in what's called the open, and so that's usually the toughest setup. And the box may be 18 foot long, and the score might be 18 feet long. So I have to score a certain way to be able to meet the cow at the barrier to rope. So it really doesn't matter um, if the arena is set up and your fastest run's usually going to be an 8. Like that's a good run for the day. But if it's set up to be 3, you've got to be able to be 3, and it's knowing each situation. So like just like the barrel pattern, how everything's different, you've got to be able to be knowledgeable enough. All right, here's how long the score is. This is what I need to see on the cow to score good, and be able to execute your job that way. So it's very situational for each arena and the cow you draw. You might draw one that runs like a scalded dog, and you might draw one that lopes out there like a pup, and you've got to be able to use the pup and just go catch the other one. So that's where you make up time. It's a drawing game. Like there's a lot of I guess there's a lot of different what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, there's a lot of different things you got to take into consideration to be able to win. Like it's not just the
a lot of
same pattern that
situational
everybody's-
awareness.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Right.
So how do you fall in the lineup then? Do you get drawn? Because I imagine if you're the first guy to go, it's like
yeah,
there's nothing to
it's
compare
the-
yourself to, right?
Right. It's the luck of the
Okay.
draw. So if you enter, you don't know if you're going to be first or last. Now, some of these jackpots, if you enter late, you're probably going to rope first. But
Okay.
a lot of places, when you enter, you don't know if you're going to be first out or 200th. So you just kind of got to be ready and pay attention, and you get to going enough, and you're able to read the situations before you back in the box. But there's still, it just takes a lot of experience to be able to go from arena to different setups to different setups. And I think with the World Series, with the way they've got the barrier set up now, it makes it a lot easier for the common team roper to just go rope, because the cow goes, you go. There is no, hey, I've got to see him 3-4 feet out the box, which we call like shoulder to the pin or head around the end of the gate. Those are just some terms we use to see how much we need to see on the cow before we can lead. But with the World Series, it's quite literally as soon as the cow's head barely breaks the end of the chute, you can go. And they just make the length of the box further away from the cow, the higher number of roping it gets. So the lower the number of the roping, the closer you are to the cow. But it's still, they go, you go. And so it makes it a little easier for the common team roper. But when you put him back in a setup where they have to read the cow, I feel like the horsemanship and a lot of the stuff, it's made it worse on the horsemanship, to be honest with you. That whole system, it's a great business, and they're going to make a lot of money, and I like roping at them. I'm not dogging them at all, but it takes less of a horse, in my opinion, to really go win. All they got to do is stand still for a second and explode, rather than, hey, I got to listen to this guy for however long he says and then go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the difference. So that those guys can run more steers and their horses can be more fractious, because it doesn't matter as much. As long as he'll get in the corner and run to the cow, they don't care as much. He can be leaning left, leaning right, dragging your leg off the fence. It doesn't matter as long as they'll win. And you see it all the time. So it's very situational, but the business model behind the team ropings with the World Series, they've done a very good job of being able to get as many people able to rope as possible to get more teams. So,
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So you just said that kind of makes the horsemanship worse, though. So like compare that to, I don't know, pick your sport, right? Or art. Pick archery or golf or probably ping pong, anything. all these sports, right? All the gear gets better, the outfits get cooler, everything surrounding the sport gets better, and the players get better themselves so that they can compete at a higher level. It's
Right.
interesting that you say that about the team roping. So as a guy, you're obviously passionate about it, and this is your life. Where do you see the trend going, and what do you think will happen eventually? Do you see people getting better with their horse, or getting to the point where they make like some kind of mechanical horse to ride instead because they just suck at riding a horse? Like, what's the trend there? Because all these other sports they just get better and better, and the gear gets better. But the funny thing about
Right.
Western sports is you got a horse for part of your gear, and he's got a
Right.
mind too. And again, I'm not
Well,
some lovey-dovey tree hugger, but we're all alike here. It's like we understand they think too, right? So you can't leave them behind in all this. Where do you see
right.
that
So
trend going?
I think a great thing for the industry has been the rope horse fraternities that have been kind of booming here lately with the Royal Crown, the Riata, and there's many other ones. There's getting to be so much money and so much incentives in those. It's hard not to raise colts and buy colts for those shows, and it requires horsemanship. Those horses have to look good and they have to show good because they're not being scored just on time. They're being scored on their ability, how balanced they are, how graceful they look at their job. Royal Crown and other shows more than maybe Riata, because Riata is kind of like a jackpot setup, but there's so much money in it. People care what their horses look like. There's a lot of money in team roping, but I've also seen a lot of guys pull a hairy donkey out of the trailer, but they can rope good and they can win on that horse. Um, and there's money to be won there. So I think both industries are are very good, and it's just a matter of who goes where. Like I see a lot of guys now buying the fraternity horses that are 6, 7 years old, that are 8 years old, that are past their show career, but those horses are so good at their job and so broke. They buy them to jackpot on. They buy them to rodeo on, and that's my goal. Is I want to be able to show these horses, but I also want people to buy them and be able to go win on them at the everyday jackpot. So there's a lot of money in both sides of it, but I don't see it going one way or the other. To be honest with you, I just see there's either going to be guys that really work on their horsemanship, or there's guys that are good at buying horses and selling the horses they don't like. So um,
Yeah.
and there's guys that are both. They do both. Like I love to jackpot. I love to go compete and I love to win. Like that's probably my more of my hobby than my um, passion. My passion is to train and do those things. But gosh, I love to go enter and go try to win a lot of money. That's really fun to me. Um, and I haven't got to do it a lot lately, but that's kind of one of those things that um, I really, really enjoy. And so being able to be a horseman and train these horses to be able to go win at the shows and then go to the jackpot, I think is a very valuable tool. And that's when I watch Trevor Brazil and I watch Miles Baker and Andy Holcomb, like these guys, they're competing on them. Like they're taking them to the jackpot. They're getting them ready for the shows by jackpotting on them. So that to me is as important as anything. And I think, like I said, there's either guys that are going to go be a horseman and help their horses have good experiences at all the jackpots, or they're going to win. Like I want to win. I'm sure Trevor and Miles want to win, but they're not going to do it at the expense of their horse's mind. They're going to help that horse get better until he is good enough where, oh yeah, we'll just run around there and rope 2 feet or spin steers, and he's going to do his job every single time. They're there for the horse. When I go season a colt, I'm there for him. So I'm not going to go try to pay $500 to go rope on my colt. I want to find a good jackpot that's going to be a good experience, and I try to make sure the arena's big and open and try to build confidence. So I think that's where the lines are. Like you're either going to buy him and go win on the finished horse, and you might blow him up, and you might have to buy another one, or you're all constantly training and improving and helping these horses. So I think it's divided. Like it's such a big industry. Like I don't know how to explain it, I guess, really, because there's so many guys doing it, whether you're 12 and their mom and dad have trained or bought you nice horses to go win on, or you're 83 and you're going to compete. Like some of those guys, I've had more older gentlemen at my clinics than young people, and it's because they care. They know they've got to maintain their horse or whatever, and they want to be able to win and enjoy their job. And I don't know, I might be derailing once again, but I think that's a big part of the industry is you can kind of just buy in and go. You know what I'm saying? So you don't have to necessarily be great at training horses or whatever. If you've got the money to buy a horse, you go buy it. You go compete and enjoy it. It's a hobby. So it's kind of like guys that hunt for a living and guys that just buy a game tag on a ranch to go shoot a world-class bull elk. For all they do is drive out there in their pickup and, hey, he's supposed to be over here, and call him and shoot him. You know, I call it shaking a grain bucket, and they get their elk or deer or whatever. I feel like it's kind of an industry you can either buy in or you can work in. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a very charitable attitude, I think. And I think that's a good one. I mean, it's easy to get tribal and get on this side or that side. And maybe over time, that is how things will get a little bit better, is just make the competition where it matters somewhat that you're a better horseman. But I think it's great. I mean, it's great that people are riding, and it's awesome that it's it's easy to kind of maybe, you spend so much time, I guess I'll put it that way. You spend all this time working with horses that have been kind of jacked up. You probably get that too, right? Someone has has an ex team roping horse, and they're like, "Can you work with it?" And you're working with it, and you're like, "Man, this thing's so jacked up. What the hell do they do with these things?" And
absolutely.
but hey, it's America. You can't take that for granted. That you got the freedom to do whatever you want to. We got to keep that. But
Absolutely.
but it would be great to see competitions keep getting like one of my favorite quotes. I'll leave it with this is who Buck Brandman is, and he always says, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with team roping. I love team roping, but no one ever said you had to ride like a dink." And I think that's great, because that, to me, that's true. Like I saw a reel today where these two guys were team roping. I don't know who they were, but man, they nailed it. It looked so fun. They looked like they were having such a great time. But then they rode out of the arena, and they did. They kind of rode like crap. And you're like, oh man, dude, if you could have roped as good as those two guys did, and then have horses that had muscles on the right side of their neck as they walked out of the arena, you'd be like, hey, now we're talking. But they didn't. So it was kind of like half pleasure and half like wincing at like, dude, that doesn't look very good. And so
Right. Well,
I always think of what Buck says
level,
about that, because you're like, come on. Yeah. That's just our echo. No worries.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, I was gonna say, you see guys at the top level, and there's nothing wrong with it. They've got horses that, man, they look frustrated and jacked up, but they can win on them, and that's what matters to them. And there's a lot of those guys that are good horsemen. Maybe they took that horse and he was blown up and kind of ruined from somebody else, and they were able to help him, and they get by, and they really, and that maybe not even get by, but they can win on him. Like that horse works for them, and those horses look jazzed up and tough mouthed, but they can win. That's their job. And you see the other turn, like you see a lot of guys that go through a lot of horses, but it's true. You don't have to ride like a dink, but I think the higher level you get, if you watch certain guys that really win, and I feel like maybe they're not the greatest horsemen in the world, but they're also not the worst, because they're going to 150 rodeos and jackpots all year, and they've got to win. Their horses got to do a job. Now, maybe they have trainers at home and they're sending horses home and fixing them. I don't know the ins and outs of it with certain people, because it's true to the individual, but I would say there's a lot of guys like that can really get the most out of their horse. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if some people ace them and drug them and do all this stuff to win. And I don't agree with that, but they do it, So it's no secret to the game, especially roping, to get by. But I think the guys that are consistently in the game, and you're like, man, that guy always rides nice horses. He's either one, got a lot of money, or two, he's a pretty good horseman to maintain those horses. And I see a lot of guys now, a lot of the pro guys, they're switching in between the fraternities and the rodeo industry. So it is helping horsemanship. I think people are able to see that you can get more out of it, out of your horse, in the right ways. But also, like I said, those guys make a living with their rope. And if their horse isn't dialed in or whatever, they might send him home and have a different one, or have to. Well, and here's another example. They might have to fly to a rodeo and say, hey, can I borrow your horse? Can I jump on your horse for this run? They might have never rode that horse before, but they've got to ride good enough, or that horse has got to be good enough to still win, to still do their job. So I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I think everybody can be a better horseman. I strive to be better every day, but especially in the team roping world, it's tough to kind of see, I guess, the line of, hey, this guy's a horseman and this one's not, because I learned from everybody. I learned from the guy that might blow up 20 horses, and I just figure out why he does it and try not to do that thing. But they also have good traits too, like little things that I see guys get by with their horse in the box or whatever that helps them cope. Guys have figured stuff out to try to win. So I think there's I don't know, I'm rambling, but you're able to learn from everybody. So
Yeah.
I would
you're
just
doing
kind of
fine.
keep that in consideration, especially in the roping world, that I do think people are trying, and that's why people pay for education or buy nicer horses. Because I'm a firm believer, you don't know what a good one feels like till you ride one. So you kind of got to go through some of that stuff. And some people it's lack of knowledge. Some people lack of care, and some people earnestly try and they're just not very good. So you got to be able to help the individual. Like I said, with the horses, you got to help the individual people, or just know how they are and smile and wave and kind of keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk a little bit more. You touched on it, and I actually find that really interesting because it's something I wasn't very aware of. As far as the whole futurity part of team roping, when I think futurity, I think like rein cow horse, or maybe like a reining futurity. And it makes sense with like timed, or it makes sense with judged events rather. So, and like the English world, they have like, they don't call them futurities, but kind of like their equivalent, like their green horse classes and stuff like that.
Right.
But it's almost less intuitive to have a futurity on something like a team roping, where it's like objective, right? It's one metric, it's a time,
Right.
and it's you did or you didn't, as opposed to this kind of scorecard that you might have in the cow horse.
Right.
So do you know anything, like basically how did team roping futurities come about? Like who got that idea? Like why did that become a thing in the first place? Because it sounds like it's had, in your opinion, a good impact on the industry.
Absolutely. I don't know exactly where it's really came from. They've always had AQHA rope horses, roping shows where they're judging the horse. They still got to catch and they still got to get a time, but they're judging the horse. And I think they just piggybacked off of that. I don't know who was the kind of the founders, and there's so many associations now. I'd have to go do my research and to be able to name drop people. I don't want to say anything I don't know. But I guess I kind of forgot your question, but
so if you don't know where it started, I mean, the way you described it sounds like the popularity of it has kind of taken off in the last handful of years, maybe.
Right.
So you're talking about there's money to be won, like,
Mm-hmm.
and you might not know the whole like ins and out of the industry in terms of who's back and what, but like, why all of a sudden is there money to be won in the team roping futurities? Like somebody somewhere had to feel like this was worth growing, this is
Yeah.
worth doing.
Well,
Um,
I think just like the cutting shows and the reining cow horse, they start promoting stallions. You know what I mean? Like if a stallion's promoted well, people breed to them. And I honestly think like with the team roping, that's exactly what they've done. So they have, say, the Royal Crown. You can have you can pay to have your stud be a Royal Crown stallion, and you breed to him, and you're able to show your horse at those shows and be eligible for that added money for. But it's kind of an exclusive show. Like you can't show a horse
sure,
that's not a Royal Crown horse. Same with Riata Buckle. So there's a lot of money of people saying, "Hey, I've got a stud, and I want him to be incentivized." So they pay the money, and that goes into um, those industries. And I think that's where a lot of the money and the kind of the popularities came from, because one, it markets studs better. Like it gets people paying attention to what they're breeding to, and hey, I'm able to feel like I'm a part of this industry, because there's different classes too. I guess it's just like the cutting or anything else. You can be an amateur and show, or you can show in the most advanced class. So it's just opening the door. I think what they did is they've just opened the door to another industry to kind of piggyback off of like the cutting or the cow horse. And I can't say that for certain, but that's what it looks like to me. Um, I truly feel like it's putting more money in people's pockets for the stallions, and opening doors and avenues to breed to better studs for better incentives, for certain qualities that you want.
sure,
Same with the barrels and barrel horses and cutting and cow horses and all of that. It made, like people look at highbrow cat. Well, now he's in all other incentives too, and they can still breed to him, and that just improves his legacy even more, So I don't know why you wouldn't. I think it's a
yeah,
good business model, because there's a lot of money in just roping. Like
yeah,
if you had a bunch of great horses and you could go win on them, I'd want to figure out what those were. I don't care. But that's why people are doing it, is I think there's money in it, and they want to improve. They kind of want to make a name for themselves. Like, hey, I've got a horse that's worth it. Like I got a horse that can win, and that's how they do it. Just advertising and marketing is kind of what it comes down to in the grand scheme of things with any industry.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think you explained that very well. So that helped educate me anyway, because I knew that team roping futurities were a thing, but again, I'm pretty naive to the whole team roping industry as a whole. So um, that's interesting, and it's kind of funny that maybe obviously it made sense on the business side to promote the studs,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's kind of had a kind of a backdoor way of promoting the horsemanship a little more,
Right.
because now you can have money earning potential based off of having your horses look better, and it's not something that just got boiled down to a number at the end of
Right.
the day, right?
Right. So it's
Yeah,
not like it's not just times at a lot of these shows. And some shows it is like if you just have a colt that's by a certain stallion, you can just go rope on him, and it's just a competition. Um, but the ones that I really like, I was actually at a show when I was trying to learn. I would just go to rope horse fraternities and watch. And you see all these professionals that you kind of grow up idolizing, and they're just normal guys training horses. But I was watching. I'll never forget this. But I was riding in the back of the arena. I was riding a colt, and Miles Baker was sitting there, and he's leaned over his saddle, and he's watching his phone watching the scorecard, what each horse is scoring, kind of keeping track with everything. And I didn't want to interrupt him, because I'm the same way. Like I want to be able to focus. I want to be able to pay attention. but I had to ask him. I said, what are they looking for? Like, what is the main goal for you guys training these horses? And he said one word to me, and he said balance. And if a horse is, and it's so true, if a horse is out of balance, he's not going to do his job as good as the next one. Same with cutting, cow horse, I guess jumping. Like, those horses have to be balanced. And I've never forgot that. And that's my goal for every animal, is if I can maintain balance, if I can teach them to want to stay on their feet and do their job and enjoy their job, I can win. I can not only win at the jackpots and be able to manipulate handling my steer better or finishing a run better because my horse is balanced, but I feel like I can train a horse to be able to go show. And I may not be as good as those guys right now, but I don't have to be. I just got to go and try to get to the point to where I see that balance even better and see how those horses work. Those horses look like they like their job for the most part. When you see a horse that wins, he does it so good and it's so graceful. You're like, yes, that horse should have won. And I mean, sure, everybody's got their own opinion on what horses should win and shouldn't, but you can't take that away from them. They still had to go rope the cow. Like, you don't get to be judged if you miss. So you still have to do a job. You still have to do it in a timely manner, but you also have to do it with some grace and some elegance. So I think that was a big thing to me when he just said balance. I sat there and thought about that for hours, and then I watched every horse, and it was true. That's what those guys were judging. The horses that judged the best were very balanced. And like I said, I'll never forget that. But that separates it. You know, if a horse is anxious and fractious, he's not going to be that balanced in a lot of ways. So, and he's not going to listen to the bridle, and he's going to be reactive. And I mean, everybody's got horses like that, and some don't make the show cut for that reason. But the ones that are sure enough showing well are very balanced and very good at their jobs. And the guy riding them is good too, or they wouldn't be. So
that's really interesting that you were talking about that. And this ties right into something that I wanted to ask you about, and that is the subject of tie downs. And I noticed looking at some of your stuff, you don't have one on your horse. Not that I could see, maybe occasionally. So I just wanted to know your opinion on tie downs, and if you used to use them more, and if there came a time where you stopped using one. What's because that's a real trait that you see a lot in the team roping world. And I don't know if you know or not, but the horsemanship folks have their own take on that.
Oh yeah.
So this is kind of going to be a fun discussion. So what are your thoughts on tie downs in and out of the show arena?
I have this conversation quite a lot. I don't really rush my horses to be in a tie down. That's not my goal. I think if you have to rely on a tie down to do a job, you're not that great of a horseman, and your horse ain't that broke. Now, I put a tie down. I train every horse to be in a tie down because I'm selling to the general public who are going to put horses in tie downs. And if they've never been in one and you tighten one down, they're going to feel trapped. I've gotten myself bucked off as a kid a lot by playing with tie downs because they overreact, like something's going on. But I guess with the tie down controversy and theories and everything, when I am outside, when I'm riding a horse outside of the arena, there will not be a tie down. There's too much danger that goes on. You ride across the river or into a pond to catch a yearling, and your horse trips. He can't get his head up to swim. He's going to drown, flip over on you. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on. You're running through the brush, and it catches a log or a branch. It's just another danger factor. Like, it's not worth it. If I can't put my hand down and have my horse drop his head and run to the cow, I don't need to be riding him outside, so, or I need to be riding him outside more, and I need to take the daggone tie down off and figure out why he's thinking a certain way. But so my training program, I figured out that I can train my horses better with a tie down, to be better prepared for a tie down I start all my colts now in a rope nose hackamore. And my favorite's one that's made by Scott Hume. It's he uses them for his cutters, and I see it in a lot of cutting horse pins. It's just a rope nose with a brow band and a throat latch, and it kind of keeps everything balanced and teaches those horses to follow their nose and connect their feet with their face, and it prepares those horses to be used to that pressure along the bridge of their nose. But for me, when I put a tie down on a horse, he's ready. He's mentally ready for it, one, but two, it doesn't really affect him much. The only time they put a tie down on is I don't want it too short. I'm not trying to crank their head down, but it helps maintain that balance. When you're trying to run real fast and they bridle up, I want them to bridle up, and I don't want them pushing their nose out. I want them staying behind it. And so at the shows and stuff, you're always going to see them because no one wants a hollow horse. And I believe there's a lot of great horses that don't need a tie down. But I think that's the reason that it's so common in the team roping is everybody tries to just hide all their problems by pulling their head down. And for me, it's not for balance. It's not for any of those things. They say when a horse leans into a tie down, that's a common thing. It's like, oh, he's more balanced that way. He can lean on it and he stays balanced. I want him to stay behind the tie down. So I put it where it's in a comfortable spot where they can still stretch out and run, but they're not hindered. If that makes sense. And like I said, I have to train them for that. I have to train them for people to wear a tie down on them, but I don't. That's not my training tool, if that makes sense. It's just an accessory, and it helps. When you start roping and you got to try to win, and you accidentally snatch your horse too hard, he kind of hits it, and it's like, hey, I got to stay off if they're trained right. But I don't know if I explained that properly, but I don't. It's not a crutch that I go to. I train them to accept it. I train them to be soft to it. I want them to be able to work comfortably with or without it. If I can pull the bridle off, even better. But that's kind of my goal, is being able to have my horse collected and have his back rounded enough to where he can do his job regardless if I want to put a halter on him. But at the end of the day, they're still trained to have a tie down on when they go compete.
Yeah, I think you explained that pretty well coming from your standpoint. Honestly, I hadn't thought of that predicament before. If you're going to sell that horse to somebody who's going to put one on there, you don't want them going and dying or something. But the reason why I brought it up then is because you mentioned those horses running, and then the fella saying balance. And in my mind, I was like, well, shoot, I've seen a lot of team roping horses go with a tie down on, and I've never seen a horse in a tie down that looked balanced.
Right.
And then you were saying, like, the ones you ride, you'll keep it loose enough so that they don't, they're not coming in contact. And I understand, you're doing it to get them used to it. But I mean, is that, for most other people, is that the general consensus, that they're balancing their horse? Because generally you would think again, that's why it kind of struck a chord right then. That's why I wanted to ask you about it, because, so if all those guys are going for balance, I'm just curious, and I would love to talk to one of them sometime, but how they're achieving balance with the tie down. To me, that seems like I could see how someone could even argue that it's a training aid to get there. But in my experience, and from what you're saying, even, is like, if you're selling one to somebody so that it can wear a tie down with them, I mean, do they think the final product is that the tie down is going to achieve balance all the time? Or are they doing it so that eventually, like, theoretically, it learns to stay balanced and then they would take it off? Because that's a leather accessory. You'd think the horse could run balanced on his own, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I see people that throw a tie down on and it never touches the horse, like, ever. And the horse looks like a runaway donkey with his head up to the right and to the left and acting a fool, but he's got a tie down on because that's what we put on rope horses. And some people are that way. Some people put them on there to help their horses, I guess, bridle up better, look more framey, like behind the bit. I kind of look at a tie down like it's kind of like a bit. You can put certain bits on a horse and they'll react differently. I see guys that put tie downs that is literally a chain across the bridge of their nose or over the top of their head. Like, there's some severe stuff, But I also look at it as a racehorse. What are they doing? They're pulling on their mouth, right? A little bit. And it teaches those horses to push into the bridle and try to push harder and run. So if a horse isn't trained right and he's pushing in that tie down, they get stronger to it. They push harder and harder. And what happens is they get more hollow and they get hollower throughout their body and less balance. So what do? They get a stronger bit, more of a chain or cable tie down to try to maintain that horse's frame. And so I try to use it as a tool. Like if I've got a horse that's naturally really pushy, I will work a lot on getting them around their back, and I'll back circles, and I'll get them to think from their hind end to their face and maintain that balance. But at the end of the day, I want my tie down in a certain spot to where if they do push out of that frame, they touch it and it says, hey, you're not supposed to be there. Come back to me. Especially in the roping, because there's so many guys pulling and doing a lot of stuff with their hands because they're trying to rope with their right hand and doing left and right and forward and back, and a lot of bad cues going on, and it's lack of horsemanship. But if they're in the heat of the moment, they're trying to win. So I think they put that on, and it covers up a lot of your kind of bad mistakes in a way. But the guys that are really good horsemen, like when I keep going back to Trevor and Miles and Andy Holcomb and a lot of those guys, because they're really good about training their horses to be balanced without one, so that when their horse is in a tie down, he doesn't look out of balance. He doesn't look like he's pushing and really trying to run through that pressure. They're staying behind it. They're keeping their shoulders up and their butt down, and they're running with that elegance and grace that we're talking about and that we're looking for. And so it's kind of like, I guess, if you put a wall in front of them and they're supposed to trot, like a horse trotting on a walker. Have you ever watched a horse get up to the walker and get their face at a straight plane and kind of, they don't bump their head, but they're as close as they can be, and they're kind of up and they maintain that frame a little bit. That's what guys are looking for. Now, how they get it and how they go about it, it's two different things. But that's my goal. Like it's there to, hey, don't go past this point. You're gonna make a mistake, but here is this aid to, you're not going past that. And if you do, you're gonna feel it. And I don't like harsh tie downs. I don't even own one. But it's kind of like that wall or that barrier that we stay behind. And so you can have horses that flick on it and try to push on it, and you'll see big old cut marks in their nose, and they're high-headed and upset with life. I guess that's kind of the difference. Like, it's trademark of team ropers to put a tie down on, but I see the really good horsemen. Yeah, all their horses are in a tie down, but I think it's to help them maintain a certain frame, and if they get out of that, if they forget about what we've helped them learn throughout their whole training process, that helps them bring it back in the heat of the moment. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost think there was a rule that you had to have one to team rope. Have you ever seen somebody compete without one? Like any of those guys at the high level? You said they train without them?
Yeah, I like you see training videos with Miles Baker and on their finished horses in a rope nose hackamore, and he's loping down there and he picks up, and them horses just drag their butt like a reining cow horse and spin a hole in the ground, and they maintain their frame beautifully. And it's because they're trained properly. They're good at their job. They're willing. So I think the main deal is who's behind the tools that you're using. And I see guys all the time that compete, and I don't see it at a super high level of guys roping on a lot of horses without a tie down. There are some horses that stay maybe they're so behind the bridle that a tie down makes them not want to run or really watch the cow because it bothers them. So they pull that off and that horse gets more free and does their job really well. And then you see guys the other way that the horse is real hollow and rooty but they work kind of good and they let them rope on them. But if they put a tie down on them, they lose their crap because they're not really broke behind the bridle. They're not really soft throughout their body, but they like the job or they do their job well and they're just out of balance. I mean, those horses just look like they just throw their nose out when you dally and stick their face up but the guy can win on them. So it doesn't really matter to them. They play like team ropers. It's always what bit can I switch to? What is it? My saddle, my boots, whatever. Rather than like my dad taught me if you really want to train a horse, you can use a hay string and ride him bareback and you can teach him just about anything you want if you spend enough time and work at it. So the more tools you have, the better results that I think you can get. But I think that's like Buck and all these other great horsemen, they can get a lot done with a lot less than a lot of people. And it's because they can understand the horse. And so these good horsemen, when they have more tools and they understand each horse as an individual, they figure out where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are and kind of go from there. So yeah, you see horses with no tie down at higher levels, but usually they all have a tie down on for the most part. I'd say in the upper 90% of those horses will have a tie down on. But there's some, like I said, that don't. There's some horses I've rode, and I when I'm riding my horses, just like I talk about riding outside, some days I want to rope the trotter and rope on them in an O-ring snaffle. I want to see where they're at. I want to see if they're pushing on me. I want to see if they're just reacting to my bridle or my tie down, or if they're really trying to do their job correctly. So always going back to the foundation you put on them is very important, instead of hiding behind the bigger bit or the stronger tie down or anything of that nature. You've got to be able to test where you're at every point of the game, And there's some horses I know that guys went on that you pull the bridle off of him, he's going to run to the bottom end and maybe jump the back end. I don't really know, but it's a true thing. Like some horses are really good at their job because they have certain things that they respect and stay behind, whether they like it or not, but they can do it. And especially for open, like those guys, they're there to win. Like it's so competitive. Whatever tool or whatever thing they can do, they're going to try. And for me, like I said, I want my horse to like it. So if I've been competing on them hard, I'm going to go back to the very basics and pull the tie down and ride them in a snaffle and do whatever I need to kind of see where they're at. And I do think that's the difference. Like whether we're team roping or we're just horsemen or we're just training for the general public, like we can look at it as a tool. We can look at it as, hey, this piece of junk, I would never ride one. I just try to keep an open mind about everything because there's positives and negatives for every situation. So why not learn them and either use them for our benefit or, hey, I'm not going to use those. Like I said, I'm not going to ride one in the pasture. I'm not going to. Like, it's dangerous. So
so anyway, and we could probably keep talking about this for a long time, but I mean, even that to me is the point, is that it's like you've even said a few times, you're like, it's dangerous. It's like, well, I'm not going to cuss on here, but I'd be like, why the hell would you put something on a horse that could even be dangerous? And also the other thing is like, I've just never seen one that didn't have its neck built up on the wrong side of its neck. And I get it. Right. There's probably just a lot of ignorance involved in that. Now let's shift it a little bit, because I wanted to ask you, I know you do some educating, right? And you're working with people a little bit, doing some clinics and stuff. I assume you're working with folks that are wanting to rope and people just probably trying to ride their horse a little better.
Right.
So that's also why I wanted to know your opinion on a few of these things, because, you're team roping and that's your game, you could say, I guess, in your pursuit, but you're also getting to be a better horseman and you're trying to help people with their horse a little bit. So when you have someone who has a problem and you're like, oh yeah, that's absolutely coming from, your ignorance basically.
Right.
but maybe they're there to just learn how to rope better or something. Do you struggle with kind of having to, like the conversation we're having right now? Do you struggle with them kind of going, well, this is why I do it because it's easy and I just want to learn how to rope better? And
Right.
and do you have a hard time going, hey man, I get it, but you're going to have to invest a little bit of time, and it's going to take you changing for this horse to change? Because
Right.
Joe and I, we work with all different kinds of people, but a lot of times, I think the people we probably work with are kind of more in line with trying to get to be like, they're kind of all in. Some of them aren't, obviously, but some people are a little more all in, where I imagine you probably are trying to help people at times that aren't really necessarily looking for like self-improvement in like how they ride. Maybe they're just trying
Right.
to rope better, but you
Right.
might be trying to get them to do more than just rope better.
Right. So my whole when I set out to do these clinics, I was just thinking of the next thing and lessons. I was thinking the next thing that I needed to do to maybe get my name out there, educate people, work on myself. And what I found out is my whole structure was rope horsemanship. Not just rope in schools, because there's multiple multiple time world champions out there that can teach you how to rope a steer and rope him good. But I really wanted to focus on, okay, well, you can rope good, but you can't maintain your horse. You're always buying the next one. He's always blown up. Here's the same problems that you're running into over and over and over. Why is that? Why is my horse blown up? Why is my horse acting a certain way? And so that's how I structured my clinics and my lessons is we work on roping a little bit, but usually when you work on yourself and your horsemanship, your roping gets better. I had multiple guys from these clinics, lower numbered guys that like to rope, and they'd been to many clinics, and they came to mine, and I don't want to say this in any way to be arrogant or cocky in any way, but what they told me after the clinic is for example, their heel horse would cut in too early, like the cow would turn and they'd be too far inside. I want them a foot to the inside, their horses were 3 feet. Well, they kept telling me their problem was they couldn't get the rope to go through the feet and rope the feet. The rope would end up in the dirt on the outside, or they'd throw it all the way under the cow. Well, I said, and we went through the whole training deal, and I said, well, your horse is too far inside. And that's why I said, for me personally, when I'm too far inside, it's harder for me to rope the feet because my angles are off. So I helped adjust where they help their horse go into the cow and help them be a little better horsemen and be a little more disciplined on how they approach their shot. And they went and won a lot right after the clinic because they changed one simple thing. And it wasn't that those guys or anybody else was teaching them anything bad, but they weren't addressing I felt like the real problem. Hey, your horse is not helping you do your job. You can sit here standing still and rope the dummy, but you're standing here and your horse is over here. So you've got to be able to figure out how to help your horse get in this spot for you to win. And so that's my deal. And how do you get your horse to want to be in that spot? Like, how do you get him to want to be there? You don't want to have to fight him over there to try to rope, because then you're worried about fighting your horse instead of roping the steer. So that's my approach with the box and with like horses standing in the box. You see a lot of horses that will not stand there and don't want to be there. And I don't know if any horses really want to stand still and then just run like a scalded ape to a cow very often. But you can help them maintain their emotions better if you go about it thinking about how that horse thinks and getting them there. So that's kind of where I mold my horsemanship. And maybe I don't get as many clients that way, but the people that usually do come are very willing to learn and looking for an answer because they don't know where else to go. You can go to a clinic, and I feel like a lot of those guys' goals is to get the worst guy to have the most improvement, and a lot of guys, they improve, but it's like, yeah, I went to another clinic, but I want them to be able to come to my clinic or come to my lesson and call me the next day. Hey, this is what my horse did. This is where I'm at. I want to help people on a personal level with their individual animal, because every case is different. And I think that's where I am able to help more people, because they're able to get a better relationship with their horse, and they start roping better and they win, and sometimes my answer to their problem is maybe not what they want. Maybe they have a horse that's way past their capability, and I'll tell them, like, hey, you're either going to have to put in a lot of work, or you need to find a horse that fits your level of capability. And that's what it comes down to. Like, you're not going to have a world-class cutting horse and put an amateur on him and expect him to win, because they're going around flopping their legs over, falling off. And you need a very amateur level horse that doesn't care as much about certain things for them to compete and enjoy their job. So I try to, like I said, it's all about the individual. Whether I'm looking at my horse or my clients, I want people to enjoy team roping. I want them to enjoy their horses. I love horses. I love roping. But if you don't enjoy it, why do it? And so that's my goal, is to help people know themselves, know how to help their horse, and improve in those areas. So I struggle with people that just want to rope and not work on their horse because they're not there for the right reasons. If they're at my clinic or at my lesson, I want them to be there for their horse and be there for educating themselves. And people get more out of it that way, rather than, oh, I want to run 30 today, and how can you help me?
Yeah. I mean, you got to stand firm in how you're going to do what you do. And that's going to help you get clients who aren't kind of on the fence about everything. They're either in or they're out, and then your life's a lot better. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because, everybody cares about different things, and that's just human nature. Right.
Absolutely.
And like, so for me, people will care about roping and the art of the roping, and maybe they get a little too focused on that, or that's all they have the bandwidth for. And I know for me, I don't really compete. For me, my long-term goal would be to be able to just ride my own horses and not have anybody have diddly squat to say about how I do it. And because I just love the art of riding the horses. And so when I watch that, that's what I care about, and that's what I'm interested in. And I think it's good to have talks like this. And you want to be able to have those kind of conversations across different discipline, lines, and kind of say, hey, why do you guys do that? And maybe they'll ask you why you do what you do, and kind of talk back and forth. Because sometimes we don't realize someone else is just focused on something different. And then you see what they're doing from a different perspective, and you go, hey man, you could try this. This might help you out. And then you might even learn something from them. But I care so much about, just the art of watching horses move. And you watch some guys that are so good at one thing, and you think, gosh, it'd be really cool if they added this or that to their routine. So I think it doesn't have to be like a hot topic. You hear a lot of people talking behind each other's backs instead of someone going right to the source and saying, hey, I got a question. Why do you guys do this? Right. And maybe you won't come to a successful conclusion, but it's still interesting. And I think it's a good thing to talk about. And that's how things get better too, because we're all in this one industry. It's not like, they're not making any more land. Well, they're not making any more room for people that ride horses. We got to learn to share the industry, and it's going to be a bunch of different people doing a bunch of different things. But I hope it grows and does better. We're young. We got a long ways to go. So I hope it gets better and better for all of us.
Right. And that's what horses. I love so much about. Right. And that's what I love so much about the industry in general, is there is so much more room to expand and grow and become better. I absolutely loved Ricky Quinn's clinic. Like I I learned more in those 2 days that I've been thinking about for years that just took my training to the next level. There's another guy that um, helped me take my training to the next level named Marcelo Guzman, and he's from Chile, and he does a lot of different things that I would have never looked at in a certain way. Like, and sure, will I do everything exactly how he does? No, but I'm adapting from what I'm doing and what I'm good at, what I'm passionate about, and we're able to learn and grow and improve. And I'll be honest, like when I met Ricky, I knew it was going to be different. Like he wasn't there to just, he was there for the horse.
Mm-hmm.
He's there to improve the horse. And that's what I like. I want to be able to improve the horse, improve how I understand the horse, how I read him. And he's very big on, hey, it's their responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. And it's our responsibility to let them and help them get better at their responsibility. And so I was very grateful for that because I do want my horses to know their job, like their job, and do their job. And I don't like micromanaging. I never have. I used to do it. Like I'm as guilty as anybody. Everybody wants their horse to stay between the lines and never go out of them. But the only way they learn to stay in between them is by letting them go out and then bringing them back. And Ricky brought a whole new perspective to my horsemanship, and I'll be forever grateful for that clinic. And I talk to him and learn from him continually to this day. I really appreciate him as a person and what he stands for, and that's the great part about the industry is we can either grow with it or we can stay in the same spot and, like I said, just keep buying horses and selling them and doing whatever just because we want to rope or we want to whatever we want to do. If have a bunch of cripples that we feed for the rest of their life because we've used them up too early. You know what I mean? Like that is that, like I said, it's a wonderful part of the industry. We can either be learning, like I can learn from you guys, and you guys maybe learn from me, and it just grows. And that's the nice thing about technology and all the avenues. So if we're willing, we're able to become better than anybody has ever dreamed they could be, because the knowledge is growing. And as long as we collaborate and help each other in every industry, we're going to be more successful all the way around as people, as horsemen, whatever it is. Like they always say your horse is a mirror to what you do. And every time I improve myself as a person, my horses get better. So I think that's the wonderful part of the industry, and that's something I like so much about it is I'm able to just continue to grow. There is no top. You just keep getting better or you get worse, but that's up to us. So
Amen. That's very well said, Jayde. But yeah, tell you what, man, I'm really glad Ricky got us linked up because this has been a really fun conversation.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we sign off here, Jayde, if there's people in Arizona or Arkansas or, people interested in sending you horses or going to a clinic, what's the best way for them to find you?
So I have a website. It's just JaydeSladePerformanceHorses.com. On my social media, you can look me up. I'm sure my phone number is all over the internet. I've had a lot of people help me with my online presence, and I continue to work on it. So hopefully it just keeps improving. But yeah, you can look me up on my website and get my phone number and call me. That's usually the best way. Call or text me, or message me, and I'll always try to get back with you in a timely manner, and we can discuss whatever needs you have. But that's the easiest way is just look me up, call me. If you like what I do, great. If you don't, I'm sorry. I'll work on it and I'll get better. So
good deal. Well, cool, man. Well, like I said, we appreciate you taking time to sit down and talk with us. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to meet you in person one day.
absolutely.
It seems like we'd have a lot more to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
so much,
cool.
man. Great to meet you. And one side note, if you ever get the chance and if you're able to, ride with Buck. You won't regret it.
I'd like
Just
to.
even if you do
I'd
it
like
once, you'll get a kick out of
Absolutely.
it. So, and we're not sponsored by him, but we love that guy. We owe him a lot, and he's a good guy. I think you'd love it. But great to meet
Oh
you,
yeah,
and thanks for doing this.
you bet.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Stay on here. We're just gonna stop recording for a sec.
Okay.